Okay, so we have three very young people, and me and Bradley are also really young at heart, which is why we're on this panel. Let me do a quick round of introductions. So Bradley Bussetto, he's the director of the UNDP Global Center for Technology, Innovation and Sustainable Development. He's currently building the largest network of accelerators and innovation labs in the developing world. Big task. Ng Chia Wee, the gentleman in the blue shirt, he's an undergraduate at the National University of Singapore. He writes on social issues and Generation Z, and he contributes his commentaries to Channel News Asia and the Straits Times. How old are you, Chia Wee?
I'm turning 23 this year.
Oh, yeah. Alexis Liu, I think you're the same age. She's an undergraduate scholar in civil engineering at Southeast Asia's top engineering university, the Nanyang Technological University. And last but not least, Yi Xuan Hui. She's a recent graduate. So she just missed out being Gen Z by 13 months. So she's 24 years old. If she was born 13 months later, she would have been Gen Z, but as it turns out, she's the last of the millennials, right? And also the last to graduate into a pre-COVID normality, into a strong job market after taking a gap year to travel, which are all options off the table to our two other friends now. Okay, before we start, I'll just do a quick context setting, right? The Prime Minister of Singapore says this pandemic could take several years to overcome, and we've heard the same from Taizo. The IMF just predicted we are poised to have the worst economic plunge since the 1930s, Great Depression. The job market is not looking good. If you're lucky to find a job as a new graduate, it probably wouldn't be for the same pay as what was available even a year ago. And then governments from around the world are funding trillions of dollars. I think the last count was $6 trillion in relief packages for COVID-19. Which is a huge amount of debt, which will have to be paid off at some point. So the young taxpayers of tomorrow will be paying that bill as well. And just to cheer you up, we think that this is just you heard Taizo speak of the concept of minimal viable catastrophe, right? So if this is the minimal viable catastrophes, what other catastrophes are down in the horizon? We're talking about other ecological and climate threats. Climate change, for example, is viewed by many experts to be potentially more dangerous, much more long drawn out than this pandemic. And we're not even done with this pandemic yet. I just want to show you guys a quick screenshot of what I was reading this morning. This is from Bloomberg, right? So right now, we are struggling with the health issues of the pandemic. We are starting to see the economic repercussions. In many countries, the farmers have delayed or reduced their planting. So maybe by the end of this year, we'll see a serious food crisis as well. I think many more months of this building up, we will have something much deeper, which could be social unrest, right? I think Singapore, we are one of the very lucky ones. It's probably in the small handful of the strongest, most resilient countries in terms of how this country is put together. So I don't think we'll have that here, but for many other countries, for many people living around the world, including the Gen Zs in the millions, the new reality isn't looking very good. So I want to start this panel by asking you guys for your opening comments. Maybe we should start with Xuan Hui.
So I think the whole COVID situation now has really changed things quite quickly for people who are just graduating 1 to 2 years after me. And I think as for people my age, even though we entered the job market when it was still strong, there's also a lot of pessimism with people struggling to cope with change, or people just hoping that things would be better in 6 months to come when the COVID is over. So trying to be optimistic about this change being temporary. But I think what COVID-19 really presents here is an opportunity for us to change to the new norm and new OS that we've been discussing at Audacity. And I think what the Gen Zs could really do is to capitalize on this opportunity and start like building up the energy to like catalyze the transformation.
Jawi?
So I think before that, can you hear me clearly from here?
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, great.
Slightly,
So
yeah.
I think the way that I would say my generation is, trying to process this, that we have received this is, I think fundamentally we feel a sense of a loss of control, like a loss of control over a narrative that we have so carefully tried to craft, resumes we have so carefully tried to build over the years, and where we are still trying to build. And I think that but when things like exchanges, career that are beneficial to careers get cancelled, internships get retracted, when resume gaps start to form, when graduates worry about the ripple effects of not having immediate employment, I think that amounts to a sense of a loss of control and a loss of the not being in the driver's seat. So I think discussions like, and I would hope to share more later on how I think we can regain that sense of control.
Okay, Alexis?
So my personal experience has been like there's three kinds of people that I've met. So there's the first kind that is very worried because they feel like they're starting off their career on a lower stage than the rest of their peers. And they think because of the different kinds of opportunities we have right now, and they believe that like their first career is very important because it determines the path that you're going to be taking, and your future progression pretty much is set when you start off your career path, which is a very common thought. And I don't really disagree with that. But anyway, there's also like people who are optimistic. I will say that I'm one of them. So like people who really believe that it is time for them to rethink their priorities, their goals, and what they really want to do, and to work on how to differentiate yourself and how to make yourself you. So, and then lastly, there's a lot of people fall into this category, which are people that don't really care, and they feel like things will definitely go back to normal once the pandemic ends, which is kind of apathetic in a sense. And most people that I've met are the optimistic people and the apathetic people. So I'll be looking to share with like why I think is a pretty optimistic view right now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bussetto, fellow Gen X.
Yes, thanks. Great to be here with you, Jeremy, and with all the panelists too. So, yeah, I mean, COVID-19 and this pandemic will be kind of a long-term emergency, right? And it will shift everything from the basics of sort of our views of nation versus citizen, and rural versus urban, and maybe exacerbate inequalities too. But look, I think so. If the question is about how does this all link up to Gen Z, I think one of the things that makes me optimistic, almost the only thing that makes me optimistic these days, is the Gen Z's views on the future in a sense. And for example, there's this famous McKinsey study that, and lots of other data that point out that Gen Z is literally the first generation that a huge chunk of that generation is making decisions about what jobs they're going to take, what they're going to buy, really based on how does that impact the future of the planet, right? How does that impact sustainability? So if Gen Z is sort of like the sustainability generation too, then Gen Z is like in the best position to really make a difference in this kind of post-COVID, or I wouldn't even say post-COVID, I would just say COVID world, right? Because it is about sort of building resilience of the planet, of the world, of societies. And so I think, in a sense, it gives me optimism because you're already kind of prepared. You're already interested in sustainability. You're already interested in the environment and saving things for the future generations. So there is some optimism there, I hope, and real potential among Gen Z.
I must say that I'm quite a pessimist in nature, and it's very rare that I meet someone who's even more pessimistic than me. So I was very glad to talk to Bradley, who is the most pessimistic person I've met. And the fact that he could find optimism in Gen Z, I think it's very insightful. It tells
But
you
I
something.
think you caught me on a really bad day with bad technology in my house after being cooped up for way too long already, and it's only like week 1. So I'm not usually so pessimistic.
Let's go to this issue that Chahui flagged out, right? How does Gen Z regain a narrative? Like you guys are, in terms of like voting powers, you're quite you're not there, right? You don't hold the block of control. You don't hold the capital, right? You're not controlling positions of power in politics or business. So how do you think about regaining control?
So I think when we talk about regaining control, because you're right, at this stage we are limited in our capabilities to enact those sort of top-down kind of change. But we can do it from the inner out, from the mindset level, because that's where it has to begin. The micro level is where it has to begin. And the mindset change that I would recommend, I would say we need right now, is that we have been too reactive. We have been too focused on, especially in the context of this COVID period, just getting through the downturn, just get through this period. What comes next? That's something else. But I think we need to change our focus to focus on preparing, being ready when the upturn comes, because the upturn will come and it will be a new normal in that upturn. So we need to focus our thinking on the skills we need, the skills gaps we need to plug to be able to ride that upturn when it comes. And that will make us a lot more optimistic as well, I think.
Yeah. And for Jia Hui, what stood up to me about Jia Hui and why we invited him on the panel was when COVID-19 broke out, the only thing that you saw about Gen Z was like, oh, they're so careless, they go to spring break, they're spreading diseases and trying to kill the old people. But very little substantial or in-depth is focused on how it affects Gen Z as a demographic, right? So when I saw a couple of the articles that he wrote for Channel News Asia, I was amazed. Like, it was very thoughtful, it was very deep, and we hope to kind of like encourage and support more young people like you. I want to pick up on a point that Alexis made. You mentioned there were 3 kind of demographics in your circle, right? Yes. So your circle, is that like fairly exclusive, or is it a very broad?
We'll say it's pretty broad. Yeah.
Okay. So how would you break it down? Like the anxious, the optimistic, and the apathetic. Like, do you see any? Do they cluster together based on certain kind of like social classes or like personality types or?
Yeah, it does happen sometimes because we do discuss about this kind of things. And like, I was having a discussion with my friend that day, and he was telling me how sometimes she will talk to her friends, and once they have the same mentality, they will start to build upon each other's worries, which is kind of like a downward spiral in a sense. Yeah.
So we need to gather a cluster of upward spiraling people like
we need to spread them out.
Yeah. Oh, we need to spread the negative spiraling people out, and then
and optimists and make them together. Yeah.
Okay, that's a great idea. How can we support that? Bradley, do you have any thoughts?
Sure. So maybe some of you are asking, so what in the world is the United Nations doing in Singapore, right? So what the UN Development Program is doing here, it's our small center is still kind of a startup center. In fact, just started last year, but we're focused on leveraging technology and innovation to drive sustainability for the world, but especially in the developing world, right? And so what can Gen Z do in this? I mean, they're already kind of doing it. I mean, I'm just reading a comment that's coming across now. Atsushi saying, Gen Z will define the new norm, and that's absolutely right. So one of the things that we're doing to respond to COVID-19 is making all these cool digital tools that Singapore and a lot of other places are coming up with to first find out about, detect and also prevent COVID-19 transmission, but making all those open source, making them available to all sorts of countries around the world. And who are making these tools? It's often Gen Z, right? The first real digital generation. And if you're a digital citizen, you're in a sense almost automatically a global citizen too. So encourage you to get involved with a lot of the stuff we're doing. We've set up something called a Youth Co-Lab, which engages with young people all across Asia Pacific, but right here in Singapore too, setting up all sorts of social ventures. One is kind of cool. It's using a technology that uses the heat from roads to create electricity. But back to on COVID, very specific global challenge that we've just come up with Hackster, which is the world's largest developer designer platform, mostly on hardware, but teaming up with Hackster, Google, Amazon, essentially all the name global tech players to launch a global innovation challenge around COVID-19 detection and prevention technology. So if you know people in your space that are into that, already tons of young people are coming up with actual like minimum viable products for that. So lots of ways to get involved directly with us. We actually have, believe it or not, Gen Z folks on our team here in Singapore. And it's not against the labor law of Singapore to actually do that. They're old enough to do that. Not just in well, so tons of ways. As I said, kind of with this digital, like the world's first truly digital, completely digital generation, you're almost by consequence of that global citizens too, and so that works perfectly in our mandate of trying to bring sustainability to the developing world through technology. So look forward to engaging with all of you guys on the panel, but everyone who wants to be involved with this later on.
Thank you. Yeah. So Xuan, kind of as their senior by a year, right? Yeah. What have you learned in that 1 year that you think you could share and support them in this journey? I guess you still be part of the group, right? Whatever happens to the world in the future will impact you a lot more than it will impact me. Right? So yeah.
Yeah. I think firstly it's also being like for the Gen Zs in general, I think it's being able to unlearn what society has taught us about what our defined career paths are, because those are based on what the current norms are and the current operating system is. But if we're looking at transforming into a new OS, then all these plans on like doing internships and so on, just for like the paper qualifications and all might become less relevant. So it's about looking at how we can create the new opportunities for ourselves and be able to like embark on our own journey. So like what Chavi said about regaining control of what they do, I think it's a good opportunity to like use this downturn to kind of do a bit of like reflection and think about how they can, like what Shure said, like the old OS, and then like create the opportunities for themselves to like build the new OS when the upturn comes.
There's a saying that the most enjoyable way to make $1 billion is to help 1 billion people, right? So it's very clear that over the next decades there will be billions of people in need of help, right? And around water, energy, food, and those are kind of like businesses, sustainable, good businesses to build. And here I must give some credit to the Singapore government because they've announced a package to help young people find some employment during this downturn, and it's very targeted at startups, accelerators, in tech research. Right, it's very future forward. They're not trying to recreate coal mining jobs or I don't know what Singapore used to do 50 years ago. What do you used to do 50 years ago? Like, oil and gas mining jobs. I don't know.
Or manufacturing electronics, I guess.
Semiconductors.
The manufacturers.
Yeah, so like all the small ideas that you have, with enough care and nurturing, they can grow and bloom, and be something much greater than anybody can imagine right now. I think I'll just have one last thing to share before we open it up to the floor. I was just reading through some newspapers in the morning, and I came across an old interview on Forbes with the first Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew. I never thought of him as a liberal, to be honest, because I was Gen Z when he was in power, and I thought he was very, I needed more space than he was giving me, But now looking back, he was one of the earlier kind of proponents of climate change mitigation, right? So this was an interview that he did about 20 years ago. He said the ultimate threat to human survival is global warming and climate change. This is Lee Kuan Yew. This is not some people, right? Many countries will not be able to accept it, but eventually they will have to accept the truth. It doesn't matter who gave what in the past. We are all now at this junction, and if you continue like this, and I continue like this, we're both dead. And I would argue that when he made that speech, he was projecting 20 years into the future. And I would argue that this is the junction now. The junction that he described is here. right? So he was somewhat of an early adopter about kind of like ecological threats and global warming being a existentialist threat. That was 20 years ago. I think now it's all being mainstream. You would not be viewed as a hippie left-wing nut if you thought climate change could really screw us, right? Yeah. So I lived in Berlin for quite a bit of time, and when I moved back to Singapore 3 years ago, I was quite amazed. Like climate change isn't really a part of the conversation, except at the Prime Minister's office. And last year it became kind of mainstream when it got out of the PMO's office and they started the Center for Livable Cities and all these different initiatives, right? Alexis, you are a civil engineer / environmental engineer major. Like what?
Yeah, majoring in civil engineering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But how and you told me like this is almost non-existent in university conversation, right? Amongst the young.
I would say yes. Until you ask somebody, then they will start to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you think we can move this conversation more into like the center?
So I guess it's more important for students to sort of like read the news and be interested to like be think about current situations that's happening. So like one thing I think is that students nowadays need to do a lot more reflection on who they are and what is innately their own value, their own goals and dreams, and like the ways that you can go about achieving them. And this is something that you have to do regardless of whether COVID actually happens. But I would say one big thing is education should technically drive that mindset across. That there's other ways to go about doing things besides just like doing an internship and after finding a job. Yeah. So sorry.
Do you think like Singaporean youths, we have a tendency to be establishment, so we tend to take on the prevailing wisdom of whatever establishment is around. So if you're a young job seeker, the establishment would be the big banks, the big consultancies, the big multinationals. And if it's not on their radar, it's not on your radar.
There's definitely that mindset that you want to strive for the best. And I feel like students just around me, I see that they don't really know what they are looking for. They're just striving for what is seen as the best. So I feel like, and what is seen as the best and what is seen as the best way to go about it. And they feel like they have to do right in that path, which I think is definitely like, there's definitely other ways to achieve the same goal, or even better, maybe find another whole new path that you can go upon. Yeah.
Bradley,
yeah, I just want to jump into this too and respond to Alexis too. I mean, where I'm sitting too, I'm seeing a lot of startups kind of like in the circular economy space. Like there's this aquaponics company, a new startup here in Singapore that's it's all about how to create zero waste farming. There's another startup that I know, also super young folks, that's like compostable cutlery for all the hawker centers, and then like a composter machine that goes around and like takes all the debris from the hawker center and turns it into soil that you can use. So there are these sort of circular economy startups that are out there, but is it a big thing yet? Is it a focus of entrepreneurship that's, you know, focus on something green, focusing on something sustainable?
I like to,
for you guys, a question for you guys.
Yeah, I like Jiao Wei and Xuan to maybe take a stab at answering.
Actually, would it be alright if I answer perhaps the original question you posed on how we can move this conversation to the center? Maybe that's like a broader sort of question. So, and I think that kind of answers more specific questions. Because from the writing perspective, what I try to do when I write commentaries is in a sense to try and put certain issues at the center. And the way, the technique I use to do that is to blend it with sort of older issues which people are already familiar with, or things which people already feel strongly about. So on the issue of climate change, I think there is an opportunity to reframe the issue in light of the COVID-19 situation. We have already seen, you know, this particular event itself is already blending sustainability issues and the pandemic. We have seen many op-eds recently which blend the two topics together. And I think once we begin to repackage the issue, to reframe the issue as, you know, something more related to how the climate crisis could well be like a COVID-19 crisis if we don't act, then I think we can begin to move the conversation towards the center. And the specific initiatives, regarding the circular economy and whatnot, they will push those along naturally as well. Yeah.
Lucien, yes.
So Bradley, your question was on how circular economy startups can be better supported.
Yeah, or just are you seeing a lot of them actually happen in Singapore? Do you feel like it's a natural or organic, no pun intended, thing that's happening in Singapore, or is it forced by the government, or is it pushed by the government, or pushed by outside forces? Like something that's really happening here.
Okay, I'd like to take this together with like a question in the chat. So Shuri was asking what kind of systemic changes is needed to support Gen Z. So I think for me, I was from the Renaissance Engineering program, and I think a lot of like the entrepreneurship classes that they try to do in university is also very focused on like practicality, like how do I build the best startup now? And often like a circularity kind of economy kind of startup requires much more effort, and like the timeline is much longer. So it doesn't really fit in with the practical aspect that Singapore is focusing on right now. So I think like the kind of systemic change that needs to occur here is really being able to I think be more introspective, look into oneself, like what Alexis said. So like your goals, like how can you achieve that goal without actually doing what everybody else is doing? And with that, like using the energy that the Gen Z built up, we try to push for a systemic change towards one that looks more at sustainability and more at the overall goals that we need to achieve like in the next few years. Yeah.
I think if you look at the life of startup adoption, right, it's not linear. It has to be. You take remote work or telemedicine, they went 10 years, maybe even more, kind of just floating along without huge adoption. It takes like that one event like COVID-19 to drive 10 years of adoption into 3 months, right? So it might be the same for sustainability issues. You start something now, and for the next 2, 3, 4 years, it looks like nothing's happening, and then one event happens, and then everybody jumps into it, right? So by the time it happens, it's too late to start it, right? Like right now, if you want to start a vaccine company, it's not the right time. If you want to start a remote work company, it's not the right time. The war will be won by the startups that started years ago. So same thing with climate change. There's a lot of opportunities there, but those wars will be won by the startups that have already started or will start now.
And I feel like because Gen Zs are still in school, it's actually a very good time to like start working on projects that are kind of like have a longer timeline kind of thing, so that you gain the advantage, like the time advantage,
Yeah. I want to take 2 questions from the audience, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay. The first one is from Atsushi. He likes to ask Gen Z, what's the most important things that triggered you in COVID-19? So there's been many things, right? There's food shortages, there's like people dying, there was the absolute worst day of this whole COVID-19. And once I spent one morning processing that, and then I got up, everything else was okay. But how about you guys? What was like the one strongest thing that hit you in the gut?
I think for me, the strongest thing was the idea that there really it's like there are two worlds. And the idea of inequality in that sense, because that's an issue that I'm also really concerned about. And rather than receding into the background as we all focus on COVID-19, it has come into sharper focus because of COVID-19. So if you look at, for example, just the very idea of working from home, it is a privilege in a sense to be able to work from home, because some jobs, the lower income jobs, tend to be what we call essential jobs. And these are the very individuals who have to go out, risk their lives. They don't have the privilege of working from home because of the nature of their jobs. But these tend to be the ones who, who in a sense have the most to lose in terms of the low income. So that sort of inequality was something that came into sharper focus. It's something which I would say I felt most triggered or most affected. Yeah.
So for Jiao, it was inequality for Shen?
I think for me, it's the practicality and selfish mind behind people's behaviors. Yeah, I was quite surprised by how like selfish people could be and all the irrational fear that was like driving insane behaviors, and also like there are people who are left behind because of other people's selfish mindsets. Yeah.
I think Shin and I were discussing, like, I was waiting in a restaurant and someone in front of me said, I don't understand why we have to evacuate Singaporeans back from Wuhan. We should just leave them there.
Oh my.
Yeah. Alexis.
I guess there was actually two things. One was like the whole idea was just around the idea of how different there are many different kinds of people in this world. Like, I was just so shocked that like there's all kinds of people in this world. So the first instance that happened to me was when my friend I have a few friends living in the UK, and they were sharing with me stories about like what kind of racism they were going through. And it was so bad because there were like 12-year-old kids pouring water at them. So that was just really shocking for me. And something else was also about sustainability, actually. Like, people were saying, we're all staying at home now, there's no factories working, the world's going to be great after this. So like, it's okay, we can chill about sustainability. Which was like just very shocking to me. There's just all sorts of people in this world, and like it's very hard to change everybody's mindset, but we really have to. Yeah.
Bradley?
Oh, well, thanks for including me too in the Gen Z.
Well, the Gen X.
That's Generation Uncle.
Generation Uncle.
That was the one that Atsushi coined, I think. Look, I mean, a couple of things that you've mentioned too. I mean, look, just the fragility of the world, right? That how little it takes in a sense to tip us over to this kind of catastrophe. And then the inequality that Chao Wei mentioned is huge. And then I think too all the time about what's going to happen in Africa. So that's our focus, right? I mean, it's going to be catastrophic, right? And probably in parts of Asia too. And there's that sort of meme that's floating around the internet. There's this famous philanthropist, record producer named David Geffen, who's based in Los Angeles, and he was posted on Instagram a picture of himself self-isolating, self-distancing on his mega yacht in the Caribbean, and feeling so sorry for himself, right? And it's just it's an image of the brutal just disconnection between one part of the world with another part of the world. So fragility, inequality, and then that this was a white swan event, right? That it was entirely predictable, and yet virtually no nation, well, except Singapore and a few others, very few places, but Singapore and a few other countries did something about it, but many other countries did not, right? Did not prepare for it, and now are having a hellish time trying to respond to it. So what does that say too about human nature, right? This whole point of resilience of the world, maybe we'll finally start to get it now, but I don't know. I mean, I hope. But resilience means that you've got to prepare ahead of time for something like this, right? But this is the perfect, most horrific example of a white swan event, right? Perfectly predictable, but did nothing to prepare for it. So those are kind of the things that.
I'm going to combine the last question with the last comments from the panel. There's several good questions that came up, but I don't think we can dive into them because they're quite extensive. So maybe I'd like to invite the panel to give like a short sentence. Bradley started his panel by saying that the one thing that gives him the most optimism right now is Gen Z. So how about you guys? What's the one thing that gives you the most optimism in this moment?
I would say for me, it's that the world will never be the same again. And right now, we have a lot of things we can do to ensure it's for the better.
Yeah, I think it's recognizing that the new OS is breaking down, and then that actually leads to an opportunity for a less disastrous transformation. Yeah.
I would say pretty much along the same line, the idea of the opportunity and the time given for me and everyone else to think about their own place in the world.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for this amazing panel. Voltaire is one of my favorite philosophers. He said, humans will be free when they decide to be free. And maybe this will be the moment when we all decide to be free. With that, I thank you guys very much, and we would take a break now before we go to the breakout sessions.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you so much, Bradley, Alexis, Xuanhui, and Chia Wee.